For decades, we've all heard the same story, right? That China's economic rise was just inevitable, unstoppable. But lately, you can start to see the cracks forming in that story. We're talking slowing growth, mountains of debt, and a system that's under some serious strain.
So, that brings us to the big question we're going to tackle. After all the hype, all the predictions, is the so-called Chinese century already sputtering out before it even got started? Let's dig in.
Okay, so first things first, we've got to understand the central problem here. Right now, China's economy is growing at about 5% a year. Now, if you told any Western country they'd get 5% growth, they'd throw a parade. But in China, that's a full-blown crisis. Why? Because the entire country, its entire economic model, was built on the expectation of something way higher, closer to 10% growth year after year after year.
And this isn't just a minor detail. That expectation is baked into the very fabric of the country. As this quote puts it, everything from social programs to political stability to these massive infrastructure projects, it all became totally dependent on that insane level of growth just going on forever.
Think about it in personal terms. It's like you planned your whole life. You bought a huge house, planned for your kids' college, all based on the promise of getting a 10% raise every single year. Then one day your boss says, "Sorry, you're only getting 5%. Suddenly, all those plans, all that debt you took on, it looks terrifyingly risky. Well, that's pretty much the exact situation China is in, but on a massive national scale.
But here's the thing, that risk from slowing growth is just the tip of the iceberg. It's being supercharged by a much bigger problem, hiding just under the surface, a truly staggering mountain of hidden debt.
You know, if you just look up China's official national debt, you'll see a number around 77% of its GDP. And honestly, that looks great. I mean, the US is way over 100%. So if you just look at that number, there are no alarm bells ringing at all.
But that official number, it's not just misleading, it's dangerously deceptive. It's only one tiny piece of the real story.
To see what's really going on, we have to start adding up all the hidden layers. So on top of that national debt, you have to pile on the debt from provincial governments, a mind-boggling 150% of GDP. Then you tack on all the debt from thousands of state-owned companies, another 88%. And finally, you add in the explosion of household debt, mostly from mortgages, which is another 61%.
So when you put all of those pieces together, what do you get? The real debt-to-GDP ratio is estimated to be somewhere around 360%. That number is just astronomical. It's far beyond what pretty much any economist would consider sustainable.
And if you look at where all this debt is coming from, the picture gets even clearer. The biggest chunk of the pie isn't the central government. No, it's the local, provincial governments. These are the ones who borrowed trillions for ghost cities and giant infrastructure projects, all betting that the hypergrowth would last forever.
So we've got this colossal debt problem. But what if the problem is even deeper than that? What if the very numbers that debt is being measured against, the GDP figures themselves, are basically fiction?
And listen, this is not some conspiracy theory from the internet. This is a direct quote from Li Keqiang, who is the premier of China. He flat out admitted that the official GDP numbers were unreliable and, in his own words, man-made. I mean, that is an absolutely stunning admission from someone at the very top.
So why is the data so bad? Well, it's baked into the system. You've got local officials who get promoted for hitting growth targets, so of course they inflate their numbers. You've got a massive informal economy that's almost impossible to measure accurately, and once you start fabricating numbers, those lies just compound year after year, making it almost impossible to ever tell the truth.
Because the official numbers are so unreliable. A lot of economists, including, as we saw, the former premier himself, they look at alternative data, things that are much harder to fake. He focused on three things: how much electricity the country is actually using, how many goods are actually moving on trains, and how much money banks are actually lending.
But there's an even more creative way to check, and it's pretty fascinating. The theory is simple. The more economic activity you have, more factories running, more offices lit up, more homes using power, the more light a country gives off that you can see from space.
And if you want to see this theory proven in the most dramatic way possible, just look at the Korean peninsula at night. South Korea, with its powerhouse economy, is just a blaze of light. North Korea, right next door, is almost completely dark. It is such a powerful visual confirmation of this idea.
So what happens when you apply this light test to China?
Well, the research shows a pretty big gap between the official growth story and the one told by the lights. One big study actually found that, on average, autocratic governments overstate their GDP growth by around 35% when you check it against their light output.
Okay, let's pull it all together. We have a growth model built on an impossible promise, a mountain of hidden debt, and economic numbers that you probably can't trust. So what does it all mean? Are we headed for a catastrophic collapse?
I mean, you can certainly make a compelling case for a total meltdown. You've got a housing crisis that makes the 2008 crash of the U.S. look small. You've got reports of people not being able to get their money out of banks. You've got ghost cities and failing projects everywhere. It's like a perfect storm of crises all hitting at the exact same time.
But, and this is a really big but, betting against the Chinese state's ability to control things has been a losing game for a long, long time. They have some serious trump cards. They're sitting on the world's largest pile of foreign currency. They have absolute control over the banks. They can literally just print money to bail anyone out or order a new wave of state investment to paper over the cracks.
And that's why a sudden, spectacular Lehman Brothers-style crash probably isn't in the cards. A much more likely outcome is something quieter, but maybe even more painful in the long run. A long, slow stagnation. Think something like Japan's lost decades. But as we're about to see, there's a huge difference.
And this right here is why China's situation is so much more dangerous. When Japan hit its wall, it was already one of the richest countries in the world. It was a stable, wealthy democracy. China, on the other hand, is facing its slowdown while it's still a middle-income country with very high corruption and a completely different political system. China is at serious risk of getting old before it gets rich.
And that really leaves us with the final haunting question. The government in China almost certainly has the tools to prevent a spectacular overnight crash. But does it have what it takes to stop a long, painful, and potentially destabilizing decline for its 1.4 billion people? That is the real trillion-dollar question.